Hello, this is Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to Manifesting Healing Monday. It is Memorial Day, and my hope is that you give honor to all of those who are no longer with us, not only today but every day, and just value that we are here today amidst all the things going on in the world. Let us stay grounded that we are here today, right? So how do we know? So we are continuing our conversations talking about Black women healing from toxic work environments. And we've been having conversations for a moment. We've been having these conversations just so people remember that Black women have a very unique experience in the workplace. Black women, unfortunately, have higher rates in terms of experiencing toxic work environments. And so we are here to really elevate the voices of Black women, to raise awareness that this is happening, so we know that we're not alone, that I'm not alone, you're not alone. And so we're going to continue these conversations to not only emphasize that we're not alone, but also to speak up and speak out about this issue, because we know that silencing is a form of oppression. So we're having these conversations, and we're also emphasizing the focuses of manifesting healing, right? So in what ways are we manifesting healing amidst these environments, or once we leave these environments? Because we have to know that healing is possible. So I have another guest today. I have Dr. Tiffany Boards with us. She is a clinical psychologist as well. And so we are here, and we're going to have a conversation about Black women in toxic work environments, not from the perspective so much of us, but in terms of from our clients and what our clients have told us. So we are not sharing any personal information about any of our clients. However, we're talking about this just so people can understand that this is a pervasive issue that happens across professions and across the world, right? So thank you, Dr. Tiffany Boards. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
You're welcome. I am doing good and happy to be here. So I'm excited to share some things that have been shared with me by the clients that I work with, and their impact, the impact that has been on them with toxic work environments.
Yes,
So,
yes. So Dr. Boards, if you could introduce yourself.
sure. So my name is Dr. Tiffany Boards. I am a Psy.D, and I have been practicing for 24 years. I am a clinical and humanistic psychologist here in Michigan. And I split my time between doing therapy and teaching. So I teach at a couple of colleges, and so I love what I do. And I remember when I met Dr. Kamani we were at a conference, and when I heard her topic about toxic work environments, I know a lot of the women that I work with have been experiencing that. So I reached out because I wanted to, kind of connect with her on learning more about what she was doing to help the people that I work with, for sure.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Dr. Boards, I also had Dr. Benson on a few weeks ago, and that we're actually doing a presentation together. I see Dr.
Yeah.
Dr. Stephanie Williams is saying woohoo for Psy.Ds, that's right. And so we are presenting at the American Psychological Convention on Black women experiencing toxic work environments and how do we support healing. So Dr. Boards is one of my co-presenters also, and I'm so happy to be co-presenting with her and Dr. Benson. So, Dr. Boards, can you share a little bit in terms of what have your clients told you in terms of experiencing toxic work environments?
Right. Well, I wanted to actually start off with the visualization, like if everyone could just kind of like picture a young Black woman who is a teen mom, and she, despite the odds of what society says, she goes to college, right? And she gets her degree, and she has a pretty successful career, and she's pushing along, and she has an opportunity some years later to go back to this college in which she was a teen mom, and to be the CEO of this college, right? So how does the table turn with that, right? So how awesome is that? So she goes in and she does her several interviews, and I remember her sharing once that she went in with flat shoes, just like regular shoes. She didn't wear fancy heels on her interview. And she shared with them, the people who were interviewing her, I want you to see the shoes I'm actually going to be working in. because I'm not going to walk around in here. I want to walk around in shoes that I can move in, that I can, really move around campus and do what I need to do. Right. So she received this job and she was told she would be the CEO. And then some time went by, not long after she received her offer, and she was told she was actually not going to be the CEO. She would be, the partner to the CEO.
Wow. Like a bait and switch.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was. It was very shocking. And what was preferred was that there was going to be a white gentleman who would be the CEO, because they thought he would be able to bring in more money to the company. And so, so that was an interesting twist for her. But that's the kind of stories that I hear that creates lots of sadness and lots of anxiety, self-doubt possibly.
Yeah.
And so this is the work that I try to do with the women that I speak to, mostly women who are trying to figure out, why are these kinds of things happening to me?
So internalizing it, right? So when it happens, it's like it's a sense of betrayal. It's questioning yourself, like this repeated question, like, how could this have happened? Because I know my qualifications and skills, and then I was told a certain thing, and then I come in. So why would they do that to me, right? So that questioning. And then also that sense of disillusionment, right? So you had these high aspirations. She, came back to the school where she was, and she's going to be the CEO. So that disillusionment, like, wow, this is not what I expected. And I imagine that many Black women, I know a lot of Black women that I work with, have had that experience of just being disillusioned, by working so hard to get where you get, and then you get in the workplace and it's not a positive experience.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It was very disheartening for her. And so, and again, she wasn't his assistant, like a secretary. She was, right underneath and, as far as for like a COO. But the point was she wasn't given the position that she thought she was going to have. And it created, some mental well-being issues for her. And so I just wanted to kind of start off with that story, just to kind of share again, like some things that, just to give an idea of what I hear from day to day in my experiences in working with people. So interestingly enough, you're going to hear me talk a little bit more about her. I'm going to give her the name of Kim. That's not her real name, but you'll hear me kind of bring up stories about different women that I work with. I wanted to talk about some statistics real quick. In 2017, NPR had a report that stated 92% of African Americans face racism, racial discrimination, and every 7 minutes, a Black person dies prematurely in the U.S. due to unequal health circumstances. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because mental health is health. And so when we have certain racial things happen to us, it creates so many issues, and that's what's going on the job as well, and especially for Black women.
Right. So you're talking about, like Dr. Boyd, it's like the toxic stress. So we go through experiences in which we may directly experience it or we witness it. And so that can impact our mental health, just in terms of that stress, in terms of living and working in hostile environments. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think racism, in something I read, is a toxic experience that adversely hurts Black Americans for sure. And so I wanted to kind of go into, how does that happen? So for one, with microaggressions, it occurs. And so like one of my microaggression could be performance being questioned. For instance. And so an example of that would be, Kim, that I just referred to, in a sense, her performance was questioned, that you're not quite capable of being the CEO, even though that's the job that we were trying to hire you for.
And we're questioning if you are worthy of being the face of this organization, right? So we're going to have someone else who we feel is more worthy to be the face of the organization. And you can be behind the scenes helping him out, but you're not the face. You're not worthy. Yes. Yeah.
So an interesting piece to that, Dr. Kamani, is that now she's a couple years in to this position, and she recently was sharing that there's big events, that they have, and the security doesn't even, like at the event, the security didn't even know the CEO. They were questioning the CEO as if he were just a random person coming into the event. So to talk about the face of the organization, that gives you an idea of what really is going on. She's really been the face in doing the work.
But not getting not getting the accolades, not getting the position, right? So she's doing all the work, she's getting all the notoriety, but still not given what she's due, right?
Right, exactly. And initially going in, I think this is an important piece to mention as well, because this is big with toxic work environments, is salary. And so initially the salary difference was 3 times. And I guess there was some reconsideration. So it's now the CEO makes 2 times more than her. But regardless, it's the work and the pay is not equivalent.
Right,
So that's stressful as well.
Further insult to injury, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Another microaggression definitely that could come up is comments on our identity, so, just questions about, who we are as a people, and we start questioning or worrying about our connections with other people as well. I have a woman that I wanted to share her name. I'm going to give her the name Shantae, and she is a resident doctor. And so she's often worrying about her connections with her colleagues who are also residents. She doesn't get invited to any outside events. And so that creates stress for her. It questions her well-being. Like, is she okay? Is something wrong with me? That I never get invited to things. And so that creates, some stress for her as well. And so that would be an example of a microaggression where,
it also gives that message that you don't belong here, right? You do not belong here. And so think about, as a medical doctor, the level of training that you have to go through. So you go through all of that, and no matter how much training you get, you're always seen as you don't belong here. And it goes back to, and I know many of us have heard this growing up, that, as Black people, we have to work twice as hard to get half as much, right? And that no matter what degree or no matter how much money you get, you're still considered the N-word, right? So it doesn't matter. So they may say, oh no, we believe in equity, we believe in Black Lives Matter, right? But then treat people like that. So don't invite you to other events or pay you significantly less because of issues of racism. Yes. Exactly. So Dr. Boards, in terms of, because those are really significant issues that Black women are coming into therapy, and it's very positive that they are coming in for therapy because they're recognizing the toll that it's having on them, right? So what have they said in terms of what is the toll? What does it look like? What are some of the symptoms that they've experienced, so that people in the audience, if they have similar symptoms, that they know it might be a good idea to seek mental health treatment?
Right. So these stressors can create so many different things. When I teach my college students, I say it's the S word, you guys. When we start talking about anxiety, depression, it often leads right back to stress, right? And so these stressors can create things like anxiety. I have a college student, I'm going to call her Jayla. And Jayla, we were just chatting. I asked her, how's work going? She's home for the summer. And she said that she works for like a little clothing store. And she said she found it really interesting that that when white children come in, her coworkers, say, oh, you're so cute, but when she noticed when Black children come in, they make, one particular coworker makes animal noises.
What?
Now, I didn't actually find out like what kind of animal noises, but she thought it was really interesting, and she watched, and she's like, well, let me see, maybe I'm imagining this. And when she saw another white child come in, she didn't hear the same noises.
Wow.
So that creates anxiety, like, and one of the reasons why I think it created some anxiety is because she said, I just decided just to go to lunch. I didn't want to continue to see this. I decided to take a lunch break. Like, she had to get away from that situation.
Yes.
So anxiety definitely is something that comes up. I also think that's vicarious trauma.
Absolutely.
So even though that racism is not happening to her, she's watching it happen to someone else who looks like her.
Absolutely. It's like this dehumanizing. So she's witnessing a dehumanization of a child, right? So when you witness something like that, you start thinking, well, what does that mean for me? What do they think of me? So it puts that level of stress, that level of vicarious trauma. And also, when you think about it, Dr. Boards, it also puts you in a position where you feel kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So if you do speak up, then that's level of fear of what happens if I speak up, am I going to lose my job? And then the other part is if I don't speak up, then do I have a level of shame and guilt that I didn't do it? So all the way around, it's a very stressful experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Very stressful.
Yeah.
I think the low self-worth is another symptom that could come up, like Shantae, my resident doctor, we work a lot on just making sure she knows that she's as good as her colleagues, that she can achieve what she needs to achieve. But there's lots of work being done in that area. And so much so that it's kind of created like some difficulties with a relationship that she was in. And so now we're working through like a relationship issue in relation because of the things that she's been trying to manage, just dealing with colleagues at the hospital, and so it can trickle over to family as well, and connections with, your partners. And so that's another thing that comes up in the work that I do for sure.
And it's interesting, Dr. Board. I'm sorry. Something else that happens too, and I think I saw it in a Twitter feed. It talked about how, we hear a lot about imposter symptoms, right? Or imposter phenomena where you question your worth and things like that. But also there's the issue where it's not that you inherently question your worth. It's because the environment is racist and toxic and sends messages to you that you're not worthy. So you pick up on that and you start internalizing that, which is very different from just the individualized imposter, symptoms or phenomena, right? And so that feeling of low self-worth you talk about can spill over to other areas of your life. So think about, when we think about, risk factors, we also think about protective factors. So relationships are often help us cope with stress, right? So they buffer, and help mitigate all the stress. But if it's now spilling over into your relationships, so now those protective factors are starting to wear down in our lives, which makes us at risk for anxiety, depression, and I think you were going to talk about PTSD, right?
Yes, you're going in and out a little bit, but I'm trying to keep up with you. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that it is a form of that imposter syndrome, and it takes it a little bit further into her self-confidence and all, for sure. Yeah. And we were recently talking because she's never invited to things. And so she's trying to make connections as best she can. And so I'm always listening for something positive. And she says, well, someone reminded me of an assignment we had this week. And I said, oh, that's great. Like, that's a good thing. She's like, but now I'm wondering, did you remind me because of my color and you think I just don't keep up? And, so it just, even if there is something that could be positive, it's still, we start ruminating over, what is this really about? Was there some type of motive, And so even then it's tricky and it gets tough, and it's still stress. It still feels like stress.
Absolutely. And I think, Dr. Boris, you were going to talk about PTSD types of symptoms also.
Yeah, so there's a woman that I know who it's been almost 10 years that she's been retired. And she has periodically, she'll just kind of bring up a memory and it'll come up for her, and then she'll become very depressed and very anxious and just really concerned about, what had occurred, on her job. And so I think that it can linger, into your life, the different experiences that may happen. And I think you've talked about this before, and this experience of toxic work environment actually wasn't due to racism. It was someone who looked like her, who was creating, a toxic work environment, and so that's where I think that's important too, for us to make sure that we're taking care of one another properly and not creating even greater stress for one another. So
Yes. So I apologize. There seems like it's a lag on the connection, right? But in terms of, I think you were
yes,
talking about how this woman experienced a toxic work environment from someone who looks like us, right?
yes,
So the
that
all
is right.
skin folk and kinfolk, kind of trickles in too, right? So sometimes as Black people, we expect or we um falsely assume that all Black people are there for us because we go through so much to get to where we're at, and we're thinking that the other Black person has our back, and that's not always the case. Many times it is the case, but sometimes it's not the case, and that can be extremely hurtful when someone who looks like us does that to us,
Yes.
and it leaves that residual, like, deep wound. And so I encourage anyone, if you haven't seen the video that I did with my friend Latanya Tolan about this issue, please check that out. I'll put that in the description section. So this woman's talking about years later, right? So we're looking
Years
at
later.
the long-term impact of toxic work environments to the point that it triggers depression and anxiety. That is very
Yes,
profound, right? So I'm curious, Dr.
absolutely.
Boards, in terms of the work that you're doing with these women. Can you share in terms of what has been their healing journey? Because it just seems like so pervasive, right? Because you talked about, residents. You talked about a woman who's a
Absolutely.
psych.
Yeah.
You talked about
So I
someone
think
else. Uh-huh. I'm sorry. Go on.
one of the things that I often talk about is making sure that there's this body mind connection understanding. Like there's a lot that, you have to take care of yourself and be very intentional about that,
Mhm.
especially when you're in environments that can create tons of stress for you.
Yeah.
And so self-care is really important on my list,
Yeah.
for that we discuss,
Yeah.
and to be intentional with that self-care.
Mhm.
When when stress starts to come our way, and then that cortisol starts moving, it creates so many issues for us. It lowers our immune system.
Mhm.
It could create obesity, breast cancer. It can
Mhm.
even create premature mortality.
Yeah.
And so there was a story that I heard about a guy named Clyde Murphy.
Mhm.
He attended and graduated Yale and Columbia University in the 70s.
Mhm.
He became a successful civil rights lawyer, had a great family, supportive family. And in 2010, he died at the age of 62 years old because of
Wow.
blood clot in his lungs, right?
Oh my goodness.
Interestingly enough, that most of his Black classmates also had premature deaths, right? So again, it just goes back to how stress can affect the body. And so
Yeah.
that's really a big piece to some of the work and the healing that I try to encourage the
Yeah.
women
And Dr.
to
Boyd,
think about.
going along with the story that you read, I also read a study talking about that Black women are now dying at earlier ages, and we're getting diseases at much earlier ages because of external factors. So external stresses like toxic work environments. And so that really speaks a lot. And I remember the toxic work environment that I was in. It was a research study, but I just started observing, a lot of the Black women, I would say, like, kind of in my age group or maybe a little older, were dying, cancer, heart attack, stroke. And that was a huge wake up call to me in terms of the impact of stress on our physical and our mental well being. And so for the women that you're with, you talked about self care. And I have a question because I'm sure that audience members are curious about this. How do you practice self care when you're still in an environment that is harming you?
Mhm.
How do you do that?
Yeah, right. And so what I encourage is, things like making sure you're exercising, so wake up in the morning and make sure you get that in, just taking care of your body,
Mhm.
making sure that you are getting good rest at
Mhm.
night. And so these are some things that I question when we do our work every week.
Yeah.
What is your self-care practices like? Because it
Mhm.
is like beyond important
Yeah.
to make sure you're taking care of yourself when you're not in that environment.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that you can be equipped when those things come your way, you've poured into yourself. The whole
Yeah.
saying, what you put in is what you get out,
Right.
and so that's where I'm encouraging for that. Meditation is a big one that I ask, go to YouTube and you can find whatever meditation you like, if you don't have your own app in some way. And then mindfulness is really important, so if you are in that work environment that is very toxic, you can just go into your head, and do whatever you need to do with it. Mm-hmm. One of the activities I've recently been asking people to, they start to feel this moment of stress or moment of difficulty. And so, for instance, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm still here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So for instance, for the mindfulness piece, picking 5 things you can see, looking at 4 things that you can smell, 3 things that just taking yourself out of that situation and just tapping into you as much as you can and just going through your senses at that moment as a way of self-care.
Grounding in the moment, the here and now. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So those are some things that I encourage, and really talk a lot about making sure that they're drinking their water during the day. Yeah. It's something I'm questioning all the time and thinking about what they're putting in their bodies as well. Mm-hmm. Because again, if we're not taking care of the body and the mind, when that stress comes, it's just going to manifest into something so much bigger.
Yeah. And Dr. Boards, what have been some of the unhealthy ways that you've seen Black women in toxic work environments try to cope with their situation? So that was the healthy that you talked about. What are some of the unhealthy things that you've seen?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I think that talking about, let's go back to Jayla. Just this it's not a simple example, but the example of her in the clothing store watching this, coworker make animal noises at Black children, and so I think that what she's doing is isolating and she's moving away from it. And she's like, I need this job for the summer. I can't say anything. Right. And so I think that could create that isolation piece. And so I just said, well, let's, I'm glad you're talking about it. And that's another piece that I just wanted to talk about with therapy is just the power of just talking, and not keeping it locked in. Yeah. Because initially when she brought it up, I said, how's work? And she said, well, I just think my coworkers are ignorant. And that was just kind of it. So I said, how so? And so that's when she started talking about it. And so I was just so happy that she was able to get that out. Yeah. Because I don't know how much we really talked about it prior to that, know? And so, and that wasn't the only incident that she had witnessed that felt very uncomfortable to her. And so I think that just keeping things locked in or, isolating or feeling like you have to stay. Mm-hmm. I was listening to someone who was sharing like racism on the job. And so she was saying that, you don't have to stay, like give yourself a timeline. Maybe there's a 6-month period and you say if things don't change within that 6-month period. I've seen that with a woman that I want to call Andrea. She is the breadwinner for her family. Mm-hmm. She's a lawyer. And so she feels obligated to stay in this space, even though she is, for the first year that she was working, she was given a timeline of what needed to be accomplished. She finished it way ahead of time. Wow. And they demoted her the next year. What? Yeah, they demoted her. And then more recently, they posted.
What was her rationale, Dr. Boritz?
They just said that they wanted to eliminate that job position. Oh, and more recently, they posted the job position again and never even told her. No. Yeah, they didn't say, well, hey, we're bringing it back. Would you like to take it? So she's really dealing with a lot of things that are eating away at her. Yeah. And so I don't want to say that she's intentionally being unhealthy with it, but she has to stay, and so because she has to take care of her help take care of her family.
Survival, right? It's a survival, really consideration. And Dr. Boards, I don't know if you noticed my expression when you told me that, because on so many levels, because I've heard this happen with clients. I've heard this talk about with some of the women that I've interviewed in terms of your position just being wiped out and you're being demoted. It definitely happened to me. So many people can relate to this. And it's not that just your work ethic or something you've done to cause this. It's kind of like out of the blue. Like, where did this come from? So it's like the shock. And then when things happen that we're not expecting, we don't have time to develop an exit plan. Right.
Mhm.
So, Andrea, she's the primary breadwinner. So she can't just quit. She has to kind of stick it out. But she also talked about knowing when it's time to leave. So can you talk a little bit in terms of, for your clients, how have they determined that it's time to leave, and what have they done in that process?
Right. So I just want to stick with Andrea, actually. So,
Okay.
we've been working together for some time. And more recently, she has shared that she's looking now,
Good.
and that she's just going to make a decision to try some things out and see how it works,
Mhm.
But, of course, there's some fear surrounding that when you have a family. But she's willing at this point, due to, I would say, trauma, that she's experienced, that it's just too much at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
it's little things like, you know, everyone has to have they're asked to have their cameras on. Nobody has their camera on virtually at the job. But as soon as she turns hers off, they're emailing her, could you please turn it on? But nobody else
Wow.
does. So it's just little things like that that start to add up, and her
Yeah.
well-being is just not doing so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she has set some boundaries, and she's like, no, I won't turn on my camera.
Good.
I'm okay with it off, just like the rest of the people,
Yes. Yes.
that don't look like me. And so, yeah. And
I
so
love it.
she's
Support
setting some
yourself.
really, yeah. So in the midst of her trying to find this exit plan, she's also setting boundaries that feels good for her while
Yeah.
she has to be there,
Yeah.
and so that was just one of them, is, making a choice that, no, I don't have to attend, 10 different meetings a day when everybody else doesn't,
Right.
no, I don't have to put my camera on if no one,
Yeah.
so this is not being requested.
Yeah.
It just starts to feel like a lot. And
Yeah.
so
So
she's been feeling
yeah.
very good.
Yeah, so she was asserting herself, but she was also doing like Yana Van Zant talks about, call a thing a thing. Like, no, I'm not. The other people are not doing it. I'm not doing it. So that was
Yeah.
very empowering, because when we think about situations like that, that's very demeaning. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, I'm looking at
Mhm.
every little thing you're doing. And many times in toxic workplaces, as Black people, we often feel like we're hyper visible. They're watching everything we're doing, right? But then when it's
Yeah.
time for, people recognizing our talents and affirming us, now we're invisible. So that it's that dual existence. And it sounds like she got to a point where it's like, no, I deserve much better than this. And so what's
Mhm.
important is for us as Black people, as Black women, when we know our worth, then we're able to say, you know what? I deserve better than this, and I have options. And that's what's so important with trauma, is that many times with trauma and depression, we feel closed in, we don't have any options. But you're working with her to show her you have a lot of options. And so it's so important that she's now recognizing that, and she's starting to see a way out, right?
That's right.
That's
Absolutely. That is
powerful.
what she's doing.
That's powerful.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
powerful. So, Dr. Boyce, it sounds like you are doing phenomenal work with so many Black
Oh, thank
women in
you.
terms of helping them manifest healing.
I
And
love it.
yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that you are here to share their stories, right? And we know that these are not the correct names. I'm just saying that to audience members again. These are not the correct names of
That's
these women. However,
right.
you're able to see across the board for Black women, there's patterns in terms of the patterns of oppression. But my hope is
Mhm.
that you're also seeing that there's different ways to seek help, right? And therapy is one way, right? So therapy in the sense of being able to share and honor our truth unapologetically. We don't have to worry about what somebody's going to say about what we said, and is somebody going to tell our
Mhm.
business, right? So therapy is
Yes.
a safe space to do that. And many times as Black people, we want to seek therapy from someone who looks like us, right?
Mhm.
I've had many clients say that, they sought me out because I'm a Black woman. And so I just want to emphasize to people that there might be an assumption, well, I don't want to go to therapy because I'm not crazy. Okay, so we're addressing the stigma of mental health. No, that does not mean you're
Yes.
crazy, right?
Yes.
The other thing is, people will say, well, I don't want everybody to know I'm in therapy. And I'll say to people, well, you don't have to tell them, right? You don't have to
Mhm.
tell people in your family
Their
you're in
business.
therapy, right? And then the
Mhm.
other thing is,
Right.
sometimes I'll hear people say, well, I don't want to go to therapy because I've gone to therapy before and I work with somebody and they didn't look like us and they didn't understand. And I have to spend half my time explaining my life experience. And I say also, we are out here. There's a lot of Black therapists out here. We need more of us in the field, but we are definitely out here. And so if you're trying to find a Black therapist, a Black woman therapist, or a Black therapist, you can go to Therapy for Black Girls. You can go to the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation and also Psychology Today. So there's so many different options. And you can even Google Black therapists near me. Okay. So there's options. And if you want to go through your insurance carrier, that's an option. You could just say, hey, I'm looking for a Black female therapist, and they can give you referrals. So Dr. Boards, we're winding down. If you could share with the audience, how would they seek services from you, and what services do you offer?
Right. So I offer individual therapy as well as marriage therapy and child and family. So I do it all in that sense, as far as for kids all the way up to adults, and anything dealing with anxiety, depression, just trying to figure out life matters, couples work that you're trying to figure out. So yes. And like I mentioned earlier, I absolutely love the work that I do. And I feel so honored to be on the journey with people.
Awesome. And Dr. Boards, how would they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can give me a call at 313-282-9782, and I am in the Michigan area.
Okay.
Yes, so that would be the best way.
Michigan residents, right?
Yes,
so you cover from childhood. What age childhood? What age?
Like 4 years old and up.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, so 4 all the way up.
Yeah.
So if you are in the Michigan area and you're looking for some support, please reach out to Dr. Boards. I'll put her information in the description section as well. I want to thank you, Dr. Boards, for having this powerful conversation with me. And I know that hearing the stories of other Black women has been healing for other people to hear. I know it's been healing for me. So I very much appreciate it. And I just want to tell the audience that I will be back, next Monday, continuing these conversations. As I've mentioned before, I'm providing a platform for Black women to talk about their experiences. We know that testimony is very powerful and healing. And also we are talking about manifesting healing and knowing that healing is possible. So I will be here next week as well. And I also want to let the audience know, remind you that I have a job coaching program for Black women. For Black women who are interested in leaving toxic jobs, but recognize that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen before they're even in a position to even think about looking for a new job. So I have the job coaching program. If you're interested in that, you can go to my website, liftinguptheclimbconsulting.com. And also, if you want to see all the other episodes that I've done with Black women talking about healing from toxic work environments, including the stages of grief related to toxic work environments, please check out my videos, on Lifting As We Climb Consulting Wellness Services, and that's on YouTube. So everyone, have a good rest of your day. As I said before, it is a Memorial Day. My hope is that we are honoring those who are no longer with us, not only today, but every day. And as I also mentioned yesterday in a reel that I did, these are very difficult times that we're in right now. And my hope is that you're able to hear things like this and feel uplifted. I see Dr. Stephanie Williams. And also that you follow or do whatever you need to do to help yourself feel better, right? And I'm not saying spending money, right? I'm saying simple things like get rest, right? And I'll talk about the NAP ministry. Check out the NAP ministry. Get your rest, because rest is a form of liberation. Go out in the sun, get some sunlight. Vitamin D is a natural mood elevator. And then the last thing is, we talked about this today, staying grounded in the here and now. Because there's so much going on in the world, we can go down these different rabbit holes, right? And it could be very anxiety provoking for all of us, right? I talked about it makes our soul weary. So please do what we need to do to take care of ourselves so we can manifest healing. And I want to say to all of you and Dr. Boards, have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.